All right, and we are live on the Sports Chiropractic Chat Show podcast, thingamajig, whatever you want to call it. So greetings to everyone. Good evening, good day, good morning, or even good night. I don't know where you are in the world, but regardless, you are welcome, and thank you for joining us on this very special episode. Today, I have the absolute honor and pleasure to introduce Luke Nelson from Australia. Hello, Luke. How are you doing, buddy?
G'day, mate. Very good, thank you. Very good. It's it's nice and early in the morning over here. We like to get a good head start on everyone else around the rest of the world. So very excited to join you today, mate.
Oh, good. There you go. And it always sounds good to my ear. Say it again. Good day.
G'day, mate. Yeah.
There you go. you can always trust the Aussies to do it properly. Hey.
Yeah, I apologise in advance for anyone that's listening. You might have had some people turn off already. So,
you get actually talking to people from various different countries and cultures and whatnots, and the good day, mate. That's an epic thing. But my other favorite is the Irish. Top of the morning.
Ah, yes, that's right.
It's such a jolly way of saying hello.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. That's we're lucky in our field, and what you and I have been able to do. We've got a lot of contacts all around the world, and very multicultural friendship base. We certainly have. So it's fantastic.
Absolutely right. Yeah. Now, do you know what? There's a little tiny story that begs to be told straight away, and reason why I got Luke on the show actually is not only because he's an amazing sports chiro and the president of the Sports Chiro Australia. I mean, that's enough to get a man on the show, goodness sake. But, Luke actually was very instrumental in me joining FICS in the first place, and that's something that not many people probably don't know about. But so we met in Lausanne back in the day in one of the hands-on modules, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah, back in 2012, I think it would have been, wouldn't it? 2012. Like yeah. That was awesome. That was a good, really good weekend there. Beautiful location. And a great bunch of people as well too. In that course, that still people I speak to and see face to face till this day. So great.
No, that's absolutely brilliant. And obviously. We got along handsomely from the start. It's two kind of funny misfits, in the group, I suppose. So we just hit it off straight away, and enjoyed. Oh man, that fondue was amazing, wasn't it? In that place?
Oh yeah, oh yes, it was. There's some beautiful food. It was a magic location as well too. And I got out for a few runs around the lake there, and obviously you and I share the common passion of running as well. So we got along quite well.
Absolutely. So the reason why I then ended up joining FICS because I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I made a comment about wanting to join or getting involved somehow. And as it turned out, you were on Finance Commission and then became the chair of Finance Commission, and somebody dropped out, and you thought, hey, let's ask Mika if he wants to join, and I was more than willing to jump in, and
yes,
one thing led to another, right?
Absolutely, mate. And now obviously you've taken over that role and doing a fantastic job in that position.
Well,
so it's awesome to see, mate. It's it couldn't be in better hands. So.
Well, that's very kind, man. Very kind. Appreciate it. And obviously, the compliment has to be returned regarding SCA, and you guys are doing an amazing job there with increasing your online presence and offering all sorts of absolutely wonderful materials for people to study, especially during this recent lockdown and all of that kind of stuff. So no, you guys are doing an amazing job, and really hope to keep the relationship going between the two organizations.
Absolutely.
Really in the future.
Yeah, no, it certainly has been a challenging time, and we were due to have our symposium a couple of weekends ago. Actually, and so we've shifted that to the latter half of this year, which we're confident will go ahead. But in the meantime, just sort of keeping engaged with all our members and offering some online content. We're actually about to launch this is a bit of an exclusive, but we're going to launch a student symposium. It's going to be coming up next month for our SCA. So that's all going to be online, and that's going to be we've got about 6 speakers from Australia that are going to be speaking in that, and that's going to be something we do ongoing as well. So we're going to have probably do another 4 of those this year. So we're sort of going to really tap into, I guess, the convenience of the online and the fact that students, unfortunately, to this day, we can't have obviously face-to-face talks, and they're missing out on the hands-on experience at events. So we're not obviously all the sporting events that we had have been cancelled for the rest of this year. So we were just sort of brainstorming some ways to give them that knowledge, and so that's what we're going to start doing from next month. I believe it's that Wednesday, the 24th, I think, of July. But yeah, we're looking forward to that, and yeah, it'll be something we'll do ongoing.
Excellent. Oh, that sounds amazing. Well, how could we possibly fail, and how can sports chiropractic possibly not succeed when we have people like your good self running big organizations? I mean, come on, this is amazing stuff. I'm so excited.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're lucky that we've got, I do stand on the shoulder of giants. We've had a lot of people that have gone before me and done a lot of good work in this organization, and I think marrying that with what's happening internationally, obviously with FICS, it's we've sort of, I suppose, got the philosophy of think globally, act locally. So we've got that always trying to feed into FICS's I guess goals and aspirations, and then us acting that out in our local environment here in Australia.
Absolutely. No, that's really cool, man. Really cool stuff. But hey, listen, let's just quickly get the share screen up. So we'll just flash your bio sheet up there as well. Got you having a sip.
Yes, it gotta hydrate.
Gotta keep it going, man. Absolutely. So you qualified 2003, a couple of years before me. Obviously you're still working in Melbourne, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, pretty much born and raised here.
Oh, you never made it far from home in that sense?
No, I did not. Although FICS and sports car has given me plenty of opportunity to travel, and so I've done plenty of that over the years. In fact, this year's very likely the first year I haven't travelled out of my state since I was a kid. So I've been very fortunate with the opportunities that sports car has given me to get around the world. Absolutely.
And it says there with your sporting specialities, running, funny enough, is something we'll get to just shortly anyways, but talks about Aussie rules football and cricket. So 2 sports and a pastime, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the Aussie rules and cricket. Well, cricket, I suppose, in your neck of the woods would be is pretty popular. The Aussie rules, though, is the unfortunately the only place they play it is here. It should be played anywhere else. It's one of the best games in the world. But we're actually about to resume our season tomorrow night. So without crowds, but yeah, looking forward to seeing my team Collingwood in action. So
amazing. So do they just have like lots of cheering pre-recorded or something, and they're going to play
I don't know what they're doing for that, but for the rugby league, which started a week or 2 ago, they've actually been using pre-recorded crowd noises. So I don't know if I don't know if they'll do that, but I haven't.
It must be a bit of a flat pancake experience for the players. You turn up, you're kind of pro athlete, and you turn up and there's this massive stadium and nobody around.
Well, that's right.
Must be really quite bad.
That's right, and they've sort of said, they've commented, they can hear each other talking from opposite ends of the ground, and which they normally can't do. So different environment for them, and obviously for us as a spectator having a watch on TV instead. So
with the television watching, of course, you get to see the replays and all of that. So, that's quite handy. So
I'm not complaining. I'd rather have it than not. So we'll proceed with that. But
absolutely. Hey, let's get this thing out of the way and we can see each other properly again. There you go. But hey, listen, running. Now you guys obviously you've done a fair bit of work with running and runners, and obviously yourself, you're an accomplished runner. you know, I think, what did you post? Was it 15K in 50 minutes? What was it?
Just recently my 5K. I think I decided to have a crack at a quick 5 on Global Running Day last week. So ended up getting under 19 minutes, which I haven't done in, I got 18:43. Hadn't done that in close to 8 years. So getting closer to an all-time PB. So we'll keep chasing that down. But certainly got a bit of running done when we're in lockdown, and so my running base has been up there, and now I've got my secret weapons, the Nike next percent. We'll hopefully be shaving some more off that as well. But we might have a chat about shoes later on.
Absolutely, yeah. We might bring that up as it goes at some point.
Yeah.
You had a crack at the 15K one as well, wasn't it? You were going.
There was
it under 1 hour or?
I'm trying to think. It was a virtual race, that one as well. There was a big race here in Melbourne called Run for the Kids, which is a big charity run to raise money for the Children's Hospital. One of my favourite runs, actually. Just a great atmosphere, and obviously that got cancelled due to COVID. So had a crack at doing that. I can't actually recall what I got, but it was a shame that we won't be racing in the near future. It's sort of a lot of chatting to patients and those in the involved in events. It's everyone just doesn't know at this stage. We don't know when the next race is gonna be. So which is it's been a big one down here in Melbourne is the Melbourne Marathon, which happens in October, and normally that's now about sort of close to 16 weeks away. So I'd normally start to crank things up to prepare for that. But I don't know. I don't think it's going to happen.
Have the motivation almost now.
Well, I've got motivation, but I guess if I'm gonna, and as with your training for Ironman, it takes a lot of sacrifice to train for these things, and you want to be fully invested in it. You don't want to be making sacrifices unnecessarily. So I mean, I'm happy with the amount of running that I'm doing at the moment. I think it's I'm finding it's a good balance, and keeping me mentally healthy and physically in shape. So at the moment I can balance it, but once it starts tipping to into race prep mode, then that's when you're almost doubling the amount that I'm doing at the moment. It's things do have to take a bit of a backseat with that. So I don't want to.
And it's not just the hours you actually spend running. You're always looking at you gotta balance out your meals, you gotta sort out your recovery times, and obviously then you're having a young family and that, so those a little bit of offloading to potentially to grandparents with the kids and that. So
that's exactly right. I mean it is. It's not just the training; it's the lifestyle, isn't it? And that's where I think a lot of people and runners. I mean, Ironman triathletes, it's a big one for is that life balance. I mean, I've done a couple of Ironman triathlons myself, and it can be pretty tough on the family. So you certainly need, as I'm sure you're aware, that they need an understanding wife to help out, because you have 8-hour sessions and then you get home and you're that exhausted that it's but you've got kids to you got to be dad for, and so it's it's tough. So hats off to you, mate, to keep going at it. That with your upcoming Ironman. That
we'll see whether that happens again. That's something that obviously is supposed to be Barcelona in October, however early October that is. But how things stand, we don't know. I mean, Ironman has been pretty much every race until end of August now. So we just don't know. I think Spain is fun to open up, but I'm 50-50 on the fence, because I haven't swam since like May last year.
Oh, really?
That was the last Ironman race. That was the last Ironman race in Lanzarote, and man, life just got super hectic. I didn't swim for a long time. Then I thought, okay, right, come March, I've got 5-6 months to get ready. Start swimming. So what happened? All the pools shut.
Yeah, that's right. Don't want to do any land-based swimming. You've seen some of those funny videos of people on ironing boards and
I was doing that maybe 2 or 3 years ago. There's video on my Instagram, right, where I was
Yeah.
doing it well before anybody else.
Well before it became popular. That
Yeah, I was there like a couple of years ago already, before it became the hype kicked in, you know.
yeah. Well, I'm sure you brought that ironing board back out, mate. Try and get some of that
Yeah,
swing
yeah.
fitness.
No, Swiss ball. You got to get the rotation.
Ah, right. There you go. That's what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you just, static, it don't work. You got to get the rotation going.
Yeah, yeah, nice. Very good, mate. Well, it's a shame it's had to come to this, but hopefully, yeah, things open up soon with the pools and
Well, they're now opening the lakes, luckily around me. So, it's
right.
June. So, summer is coming and the lakes are getting warmer.
Ah,
So
good,
I'm
good.
thinking I'll salvage something out of this at least.
Yeah, yeah, that's good, mate. Hopefully it all happens soon.
But hey, but let's come back to the running a little bit more. And
Hmm.
obviously, the point of these little chats is to kind of be bit inspiring, bit entertaining and funny, and also a bit inspiring, and all of that. So, if we're going to make it a little bit practical, what's the kind of, would you say, top 3 pitfalls for sports chiropractors in terms of runners? So,
Yep.
when you treat a lot of runners in your clinic anyways, and that. So what are the kind of 3 things that you think your sort of average sports chiropractor might miss or get wrong or just blatantly not notice?
Yes, I think probably the biggest one that people need to consider with runners is training load, and there's a couple of things that to do with that. I mean, one of the reasons that running injuries are so, they're so common, more than 50%, well, the accepted figure is generally 50% of runners will get injured at any one time. So, which is very high. In fact, it's higher than most contact sports. So, and one of the reasons that it is so high is that running is so easy to do. You can just chuck on your runners and off you go. And most of the running injuries are overload injuries. So they're not injuries, acute injuries like, oh, I've just done my hammy, or, I've just, there's really very few falls in running. So most of them tend to be overload. So they tend to sort of, creep on over a period of time. And in fact, sometimes with the training load, if you have a sudden escalation in that training load, the injuries might not come for 2 weeks down the track. So it's really important that when you're dealing with runners, is that you have a good discussion over their training history. And there's a couple of ways that you can do that. You can either give them a spreadsheet. I mean, you can firstly just ask them, just sort of say, "All right, well, tell me what your last 2 weeks was," and guaranteed they'll whip out either their Garmin or their Strava, and they can go through and tell you exactly what they've done. The other ways you can do it is you can get them you can actually have a look at their Strava and just say, "Look, show me your Strava," and have a look through that. But when you're sort of starting out with runners and you're not sure exactly what you're looking at there, is it can just be good to say, "Oh, look, at the end of the consult, look, I'm going to give you a spreadsheet here, and I'm just going to get you to put in your last, you could say the last month of training into this, just your distances, your times, and I also like to do a rate of perceived exertion, so that's how hard the session was, and then you can calculate the amount of units that session was worth. So you just calculate the time, the duration by the rate of perceived exertion, the RPE, and that gives you an arbitrary units for that session. And then you can have a look through that, and you can look at sort of the weekly totals, and you can sort of see how that may fluctuate or change. And a number of times, not always, but a number of times you can see loading spikes. So when they've done really too much in a week, and that can be attributed to the injury. Now, why that's important is because okay, you might not be able to change it now. They've already made that mistake in the past. But if you can educate them and tell them, look, this is what you did wrong, then you can stop that from happening again. So I think that's a really, really important one. The other thing in terms of and there's a lot of debate around at the moment on the value of the acute chronic workload ratio. So there's a number of the international sports bodies, including our Australian Institute of Sport, have been using the acute chronic workload ratio. And those not familiar with it can read up on Tim Gabbett's work. But there's been a lot of debate about the merit of that. And the AIS have just actually put out a paper a couple of months ago saying that they don't recommend using that at the time being. but it gives you a guide. Like it's not a Bible saying that, you know, and the acute chronic workload ratio is basically looking at, and there's a number of ways to calculate it, but the most common one is comparing what you've done in the last week to the average of the 4 weeks before, you know,
Gotcha.
of that week there. So what we tend to find is that if you've done significantly more in that past week than what you have in the 3 weeks preceding it, then your risk of injury goes up, which is pretty, it's pretty common sense. The general figure is that the ratio that Tim Gabbett recommends is 0.8 to 1.3. So that's, you know, if you start going above 1.3 times in that previous week than what your body's used to, then you start to run into a bit of a risky area there. And generally, what they consider a loading spike is when you start to go 1.5 times over that. So if you've done 1.5 times more in that previous week than what your average of the past 4 weeks has been, then you're at risk. So it's a guide. So it's not saying that if you go over 1.5, you're going to get injured. It's like, let's just try and stay away from that area if we can. You know, I think that because there's obviously, if I follow some of these discussions on Twitter, and there's some, you know, people arguing about, oh, we should throw it out, and it's like, well, what do we do? Like, what guide do we use? Do we just sort of say, go and run what you want and let people do, you know, ridiculous amounts in a week? So I think that there sort of has to be some sort of rough guide that you fall with, but it's not you know, we don't rely on that. The other rule that we've got for in terms of training load for runners is the 10% rule. And that is an okay rule. I mean, if you actually look at converting that 10% rule into the acute chronic workload ratio, it tends to work out that people will sort of stick within that within those 0.8 to 1.3 ranges. The fallback for the 10% rule is that it doesn't work so much for those beginning to run, because, you know, if you're only doing 2Ks a week, you know, to build up to a decent amount is going to take you a long time, because, you know, you'd go 1 week you do 2Ks, and the next week you do 2.2, then it's, you know, 2.6, and it just takes forever. So we tend to find that those that are doing, you know, less than sort of 20Ks, they can often do increase anywhere up to 30%. So 10 to 30% can increase. Those with a previous history of injury, you know, they're not very strong. They've got some other issues going on there as well. Well, you might increase them by a little bit less. Whereas those possess good strength, they've had a history of running before, they don't tend to have too many injuries, then you can ramp them up to 30%. And then once you get from sort of, you know, 20 Ks up to sort of, you know, anywhere up to 50, then you can do sort of 20% increases, and then, you know, above that, then above from 50 to 100, I say 10%, and then once you get into 100 Ks above, then you might increase by a little bit less than 10%, because you know, for those guys, 10% is a fair whack. You know, it's 10 up to 10 Ks. So yeah, there's you know, the 10% rule there can be used. Just realize that if you've got beginner runners, then that can take a bit of time. So either those two methods, I think, is good. The other one that's in terms of loading is with in terms of splitting up the intensity. And one of the things that runners will tend to do is that they'll, especially novice runners, is that they'll just run every run hard. You know, they'll go out there and they'll just smash themselves, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, got to sweat up, and, you know, that was a good session. But they'll do.
It's not a workout if you're not the sweaty, grunty mess, you know.
That's exactly right. It's you know, every session like that, hard, and that hard running is hard on the body. You know, it takes a lot to recover, and especially for new runners, you know, they need to be building up that strength and that tissue capacity, and so that can be an issue as well, is if they're doing too much of their running at a high intensity. So I like the polarized training. There's a lot of research, and for those who want to read more about that, Stephen Seiler's done a lot of good stuff with that there. But what they've found is that the ideal split in intensity is 80-20. So that's 80% of your weekly training to be at a low intensity, and that's a low intensity is, you know, conversation pace. So, you know, you can talk to the person next to you. That's exactly right. Yes, it's really, really easy stuff, and so and then that remaining 20% is your high intensity, and you don't really want to be, and that 20% then is actually quite hard. So you don't want to be sort of stuck in the middle zone. You know, you've got your easy stuff here, and then you've got your hard stuff up here. But a lot of runners will tend to do, you know, it's not easy and it's not flat out hard. They're just in this grey zone in the middle, and the problem with that is that. That's exactly right, junk miles. And the problem with that is that you then don't get the training benefits of going hard. You don't get the training benefits of going easy. You're somewhere in the middle there, so you're not really, you know, getting the fitness adaptations, and it's also very taxing on the body and takes longer to recover from. So, so that's probably the two biggest. The other thing that we see is with intensity, and it takes a lot of education for runners to tell them that you know, that you can get better by running slow, and you know, some are pretty doubtful. It's like, oh, I don't know about that, but you know, and when you're dealing with an injured runner, that's often how you'll start them out. Is, you know, give them for most, you'll give them you know, just building up the volume and get some miles in the legs at an easy intensity, and they're often amazed at how much fitter they get just doing that. And I think that a lot of novice runners can see tremendous improvement just by doing slow, easy runs, and you know, really building up the tank and the engine. They'll get fitter, they'll get faster, and you know, one of the things that I think in the last year for me, like there hasn't been any really big goal races that I've been training for. I've just been doing mainly just slow, easy runs with the occasional hard one thrown in. But you know, I'm seeing my fitness has been great because I've just been able to get consistency in training and under my belt, not being interrupted by you know, a lack of motivation or for some injuries. So that's sort of the first thing when dealing with runners is getting the training loads right. So your acute chronic workload ratio is one guide, your 10% 10 to 30% rule, and then also with the training intensity as well. So having that 80-20 split. The next mistake I think that chiropractors make with runners is assessing strength in runners, and it's something that you know, when I graduated from uni, really good. You know, I think we were quite good at assessing for mobility and you know, our palpation skills were really good, but we didn't really have enough. I didn't feel we were given enough testing on strength. You know, how to test someone's strength. It was almost assumed, like if someone came in and, you know, you wanted to do some rehab to them, well, this is what you did. Like if they had a sore knee, well, this is what you gave them, and if they had a sore ankle, sprained their ankle, then this is what you did there. But there wasn't really enough assessment around that. It was more just like, oh, well, this is just what we do, and you know, which is it's making a lot of assumptions firstly, and second is a pretty lazy way to do it. And I think that the more I've learned around that is you know, testing for that strength, and so that you can then be a lot more specific with your prescription, your exercise rehab as well. So I think that and there's a couple of home tests that you know, chiropractors can do in the clinic, but also get their patients doing at home. First one for runners is a standing calf raise to fatigue, and the calves are the for anyone that's seen me on Instagram, but the calves are my favorite muscle, but they are so important for runners. You know, they have to take 6 to 8 times the body weight there, so they do a hell of a lot of work, and so you need a big contribution from those things. So calf raise to fatigue is a really good, useful test to do. A couple of tips with that is firstly getting them to do the calf raise on both if you're assessing them in clinic, getting them to do both. I'll raise up on both, just have a fingertip against the wall there for a bit of balance. Raising up on both, you can use a ruler or a pen or something to mark the height. Then they drop down and they switch to one leg, and then they raise up and down as many times as they can, making sure that their head hits that marker each time. That makes sure they're getting a full height, and you can even do that to a metronome as well. So you can do that to the beat of, you know, of 30 seconds as well. So just raising up and down there, and making sure they keep that beat. Because a couple of things you'll see is people either will put in half reps, so they'll just sort of do little reps there like that, or they'll try and do bang out as many as they can quickly. So having that metronome there to really slow them down is quite useful. So you can time that, and then once they go to the point they can't do anymore, then you switch over and do the other side. It doesn't matter which side you do first. There's no crossover fatigue with that test, and then measure the other side. And you want to see them, the general accepted rule does vary with age, but you want to see them get above 25 reps, and also be within a 10% of each side. Runners, and the higher level runners you get to, then you really want to see them getting above 35, and even someone's upwards of 40. So your higher level runners, you want to see getting more than that. But that's a really important way to assess, a really easy way to assess the calf strength. The other ways that you can assess it, you can do things like a bent knee. So if you want to sort of target more the soleus, you can do have them up against the wall again as well. Have some, you know, they're almost doing a wall sit, so sort of lean back into the wall there, and then they're just, you know, raise do a calf raise there whilst they're sitting into the wall, and then lift the foot up, and you just want to make sure that they can maintain a really nice high raise, and that's sort of targeting more the soleus, so that lower calf muscle, which is actually the more important one for runners, and you can sort of compare that calf raise height from side to side. So you'll see those that if there's often a strength, you know, you get them to stand on one and they'll sort of they'll lower down on that side. They can't just maintain that nice end range position. So that's one way that you can look at the soleus there. And the other way you can do is you can actually do that as an endurance hold. So you can have them in that wall sit position, raising up there, switching to one side, and then see how long they can hold that position before they fatigue and drop down, and you can compare that from side to side as well. The next most important muscle group for runners, the second is the quads. So you got your calves, then your quads, and a good test for that is the single leg rise test, or single leg sit to stand, and that's basically getting them on a chair or a table that's about you know, if they sit down, it's at 90 their knees at 90 degrees, getting them sitting on that, and then just hands on hips, single leg, and then just standing up and down and doing that for as many reps as they can as well. Again, we want to see that get to about 25 reps, and no more than 10% symmetry from side to side. That's a real burner. You'll feel it working the quads and also the glutes there, and it's sort of amazing. I remember when I first started doing these things, because I didn't really have, you know, any assessments to do, you know, in clinic for strength. Start doing these things and you see some really interesting stuff, and you know, a lot of times the weakness is on the injury side, but sometimes it's on the opposite side. Like sometimes you see huge discrepancies there, and you know, you might have Achilles tendinopathy on one side, but the other leg is just so weak that you know, they're obviously then preferring to load into the Achilles side, so then that side starts to get overloaded, and that's what gets symptomatic. So it's really important, you know, to assess both. And then probably the third test that you can do is a single leg bridge test. So that's getting them to do a single leg bridge, just up have the foot up on a box there, and with the knee flexed to about sort of 30 degrees, and then you're just getting them to do just some repeated rises again, just doing as many as they can to fatigue. And magic mark there again is 25 reps that they're looking at there, and that's sort of testing a bit more in the posterior chain. So looking at hamstrings and also the hip extensions, the glute max there as well. I mean, I tend to use, I've got access to, I've been using handheld dynamometry for probably close to 10 years now. And that's been a really useful addition in my practice. So handheld dyno, for those that aren't sure, is just a little device that you have, and that gives you get them, you know, pushing into that device, and that gives you a reading of peak force. I've sort of gone another level up from that now, and I've got the Access system in practice, which we've got force plates and stuff as well. So we can do things like jumping and hopping and landing and look calculating forces and impact forces there with that. So that's been, I've had that in the practice for the last year and a half now, and that's been awesome. Actually, been one of the best sort of additions that I've made, and certainly opened up a lot of to get access to a lot of data for to assess. So because I'm big on, I'm a big on the assessment. I think that if you can nail your assessment and get that down right, and that includes your history, obviously having a good discussion with the patient and really assessing the patient there, it gives you, specific targets and hopefully measurable objective targets that you want the patient to then achieve and baseline of which they where they're at, and you can then plan your treatment and your rehab around that. So that's probably the next thing I think the mistake that chiros make. Probably the third one as well, and it does sort of tie in with loading is getting runners to stop, and also being too averse to pain, and as in, say, if someone's coming in with knee pain, rather than just saying, well, just stop everything, don't run, we just need to wait for this pain to be gone. Actually recognizing that there is safe limits for pain, so that you can actually run with pain for a lot of conditions. Probably the only conditions that you wouldn't would be certain types of stress fractures. So some stress fractures, low risk stress fractures, you can run with a bit of discomfort, depending on where the athlete's at with their in season. High risk stress fractures you don't, and medial tibial stress syndrome is one of those ones that you can just need a bit of rest sometimes. But most other conditions, they're only a small percentage of the injuries that you'll see in clinic. Most other injuries, things like your patellofemoral pain, your tendinopathies all around the body, plantar fasciopathies, all those sort of injuries can run with some sort of pain. And where we like to sort of the number we like to put on that is we say, if you give me a mark of your pain out of 10, so 0 being no pain, 10 being the worst pain you ever got. If we can stick to at or below 4 or 5 out of 10, then we're okay. And that means 4 or 5 during the run. It means 4 or 5 after the run. So, that the rest of that day. And it also means 4 or 5 out of 10 the next day. So we don't want to see them waking up the next day going, oh, geez, it's now an 8 out of 10. That means that we've overdone it. So educating the runners on that it's okay. And a lot of runners, and, runners in particular, they love doing what they're doing. They hate being told to stop. And it's in fact, one of the reasons they don't seek help is because they're afraid that whoever they see is going to tell them to stop. And I've seen some shocking incidents of runners going to see, GPs and the GPs are like, what are you running for? Just stop running, stop doing that. And that's exactly right, and it starts a really bad downward spiral. So, so runners are often happy to hear that they can run with some discomfort, and it does take some reassurance. Some are really fearful that they're doing some damage, and so you have to really educate them that hurt does not equal harm, and pain is an alarm system. It's not a sign of necessary tissue damage, and that it's important to maintain the strength, because what you'll see happen, and I think some of the easier patients to work with are those that have got any sort of musculoskeletal issue, and they've just stopped everything. They've stopped everything, like, they've stopped going to the gym, they've stopped doing this, and they're sort of, it's almost easier in a way, because you're just getting them starting to exercise. You'll see exercise in the right way. You'll often see good improvements in their condition, whether it be doing a certain exercise in the gym or starting them to run again. So that's why I quite like seeing those patients, is because firstly they're pretty happy to hear that they can get back and do things. But secondly, you'll often see some really nice changes with just getting them exercising again. So. So that's probably the other thing, is that not to tell them to stop. And the other thing from going back, tying into our loading perspective as well, is that once you get them doing nothing, if you look at that acute chronic workload ratio, if you get them doing weeks of nothing, it takes quite a while to safely build them back up to, back up to where they need to be. So, the AIS had a pretty nice infographic if you were to stop training, so if you did zero training for 2 weeks, it takes you 6 weeks to build up to where you were before, including those 2 weeks. It takes an additional 4 weeks to safely build up to where you were pre-stopping. So that's a huge amount of time. And when you explain that to people, then they're like, oh, geez, yeah, okay, we don't want to be taking time off, and how detrimental that is. So they're probably the three. Yeah, probably the 3 biggest things that I find with managing runners.
Wow. You know what? I hope everybody who's been watching and listening has paid attention, because that was amazing.
Thanks, mate.
You know what? This is probably the easiest interview I've ever done in my life, man. You just we're getting some absolute quality content here. Absolutely.
Well, I could talk for days on running. So it's not a obviously something I really enjoy myself and enjoy seeing runners. So it's not it's not hard. But
yeah, that's why I invited you on the show, man. Get the stuff out here. But hey, listen, coming back, we'll kind of take apart a couple of different things you mentioned earlier. If we start from point 1, which was the loading perspective mainly. So you said about certain things. I wanted to catch up on that tools are not good enough, they're not valid, so forth and so forth. That's a very pedantic way of looking at it. When you start really getting to the nitty gritty of a lot of or even your orthopedic tests, I mean, come on, if you only look at, with the straight leg raise, for example, you only look at do they get shooting pain into the foot on straight leg raise? If they don't, then it's a failed test and it's rubbish. However, what else can you learn? So when you move somebody's leg, okay, what else happens? So there are so many different things you can learn. And so no test, in my opinion, is ever completely useless.
No, that's absolutely, yeah.
In a way, every test is worth doing, because you can learn something for it, whether it's what it says on the label or not. That's a different story altogether.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I think, that there's the whole debate over special tests aren't so special, but that they might not be doing what they were created for, but there's still, it can still be a lot of merit for them in terms of looking at what their mobility is like, what have they got any fear avoidance with that particular movement? Does it provoke pain? And you can almost use those tests as a pain provocation procedures and to gauge progress for a patient. I've used those number of times that you test something, it's like, oh yeah, that's a 5 out of 10 when you're doing that, and then you follow them up the next time. All right, do that again for us. Oh, it's only a 1. Okay, well that's great. Because sometimes you and I'm sure you've had it as well, like patients will come in, it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm any better. It's like, all right, well let's do these tests, and lo and behold, they're able to do all these things that they weren't able to do a week ago, and they're like, oh, actually that is quite a lot better. So patients forget those things, so you just need to give them a reminder sometimes, and that's right.
The other thing, actually, I find it's, in a way, it's amusing, but sometimes when you see patients who come back and they say, "Oh, I'm feeling no better. I'm just as bad as I was before." So then you just ask, "So how long have you been feeling like this?" Because he felt better when he walked out of the clinic. When did this bad thing come back? Oh, this morning. Right. So that was. I saw you 2 weeks ago, and only since this morning you've been feeling bad. Okay. So what did you do yesterday? Oh, I ran a mile,
Yeah, absolutely, very true, and it's important to sort of, you almost need to get a diary of what they've done that last week, because they'll only sort of sometimes comment on how they feel that day, but I've also learned that it's important to ask, well, how have you been for the rest of the week, and you'll get that. You're like, oh, I've been great for a week, and then only just today it started to flare up again. So absolutely, that's a big one. That's all these things you learn along the way that come with practice. That there's only unfortunately only so much that they can teach you at uni, and the rest is comes down to a lot of experience that you pick up, a lot of mistakes as well that you learn along the way.
Oh, come on. We all made some proper
Yeah,
howlers out there.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
you know, got to give credit to the universities and the teaching educations. You know, they're doing an amazing job in obviously training our colleagues and giving them all the basic tools that will then stand them in good or keep them in good standing when it
Yep.
comes to taking on postgrad courses and kind of choosing their specialities, if you like. You know, whether they want to go to sporting stuff or pediatrics or, you know, whatever, geriatrics, goodness knows what. But, you know, so all these different things, you know, you got to give the universities credit for doing that.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's up to, it's not the universities to teach you everything. It's, you know, teach you enough to get you started and you know, I guess be safe, and then it's up to you to decide which pathway you go down. And for me, yeah, that I chose that sports pathway pretty early, and it was thanks to actually a FICS module that got me really inspired. I remember I attended my first FICS module. When would it have been? It would have been, I think, 2 years out of uni. I think it was because didn't happen as frequently back then. In this is 2006, would have been that first module that I did, and I remember going to this thing and just getting exposed to all this information. I'm just like, whoa, this is amazing, and really inspired seeing the likes of you know, Henry Pollard. We had Noel Patterson. We had Pete Garbutt, I'm sure, was there. Rick Ames, Brian Nook. You know, all these guys there are involved, and yeah, it really inspired me to go down the path that I'm currently going down. And still continue always learning. That's one of the fantastic things is you know, you can never know everything about everything, and that's why I guess over time I've sort of started to get a bit more niched into a particular area, and just trying to learn as much of that as I can. So which is it's great. Yeah, I love the continued learning part of our profession.
Absolutely right. No, and you know, that's something, of course, you know, the ICSC course that FICS is putting on, that's a great thing, because, you know, it is very comprehensive, but also very much written by chiropractors for chiropractors. So it's not a sports medicine thing, basically. It is what you need as a sports chiropractor, you know, to get cracking on, and, you know, pardon the pun, but, you know, to really kind of get into the meat and bones of it properly.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, really cool thing actually happened just recently. I had a good chat with Tom Hyde.
Oh, yes, he's a legend.
The book. You know?
I know. Literally wrote the book. Yeah.
Literally, he wrote the book. Yeah, exactly. And it was an amazing chat. You know, such a lovely man, and
oh, he's amazing.
yeah, and still he has that absolute drive to keep learning. And I mean, he's not quiet and that, but his passion really came through in that chat as well. It was a really amazing chat.
Yeah, Tom's lovely. I've had the privilege of meeting Tom and actually through over in the States through FICS, and he's just so humble, and you know, now obviously friends online, and we you know, interact with each other quite regularly, and he's it's certainly, you know, he's one of those shoulders that I'm standing on, who've done a lot of great work for our profession. So we're quite lucky like that. We've got a few, and now it's sort of up to us as well to lead the way for the younger generations coming through as well.
Well, man, the shoes are big shoes to fill, isn't it? You know.
Oh no, I don't know if we'll ever fill those shoes, but at least we'll do our best, eh?
I'll give it a good shot. But hey, listen, the other little thing, you know, the coming back, working slowly through what you said earlier. I'm trying to keep it all straight in my own head. But about the calf and the soleus, or the gastric and the soleus.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I always used to confuse, you know, which one is the eccentric, which one is the concentric loading when it comes to the actual stride mechanics. Of course, it, to a degree, changes on your foot landing or foot strike, if you like. But as a general rule, would you say that is the soleus that is more eccentric loading, calf is more concentric? How would you describe it?
Well, it's actually interesting. During running gait and even walking, the calf, both calf muscles actually function what we call quasi isometrically. So there's actually not a lot of contraction, and there's some really cool imaging that's been done on walkers to show that the actual the gastrocs and the soleus are actually not changing a great deal in length. It's actually the tendon. So the calf unit itself is contracted and holding, and it does yield a little bit. So there is a little bit of lengthening that occurs in it, but essentially it's holding, and that's why it's called quasi-isometrically. So it's a quasi-isometric contraction with running, and it's actually the tendon that elongates and then snaps back. So it's actually that has that energy storage and release. And what happens is, obviously, if there's reduced calf muscle capacity, then the tendon then doesn't have as good a base on which to recoil from, and so you then start to get a lot more load put on that tendon. And so a good example of that would be running on sand. You know how hard that is on a really yielding surface, and how hard that is on the calf muscle and the Achilles tendon. It's sort of a similar thing. If your calf muscle's not functioning efficiently, then it does put more load on that tendon there. So it's actually, it's an isometric contraction.
Okay, so if I get this now straight, so what happens is your calf muscle or the calf unit just produces a platform for the tendon to lengthen and recoil.
Yep.
So essentially, it's almost like a passive thing.
Well,
it's just holding the shape.
And the tendon, exactly right. And the tendon is just that energy storage and release. It's like the elastic bands.
That actually explains a couple of things. That's brilliant.
It's I remember seeing the footage of that. It was that they did I don't think they've had the ability to do it yet. I don't think they've had the ability to do it yet during running, but I remember seeing footage a few years ago at an SMA conference, and they had an ultrasound hooked up to someone's leg and had them walking, and that they showed in real time ultrasound what was actually happening with the gastroc complex, and it was really cool. I remember at that time thinking, oh, this is pretty amazing, and so that sort of again changed my way of thinking too.
Oh, cool. Hey, listen, this opens another door actually. So looking at sprinters versus marathoners, marathon runners, or ultra runners even, all right? So obviously, sprinters have massive calves.
Yep.
Like that kind of thing. So that's my thought, right?
Yep.
And you got, marathon runners who have skinny little calves.
Yep.
Okay? So is it, this is a total hypothesis, and you probably will tell me which way it is, but sprinters, do they then get an actual shortening of the calf muscle that then produces the bulk? Or is it just that fact that they are just genetically weird?
No, it's actually, you actually look at sprinters, they can't, a lot of them aren't. Usain Bolt's actually, and he's a bit of he's just incredible himself, but you actually look at his calves, they're actually not that big. And in fact, you can't tell, there's often not a big difference between, say, he's got quite skinny calves actually, and you look at the difference between him and say, and Ali Kipchoge, that they've got very similar in that regard. But you look more proximally and you look at their glutes, and the glutes are huge, and the hamstrings and the quads are a lot bigger in sprinters. And that's because the running demands for distance running, it is definitely more calf focused. So that's the number one muscle. But as you start to increase speeds and going towards sprinting, then that's when you get more proximal involvement. So that's when your hamstrings, your hip flexors actually become used quite a lot more. So that's where you see the calves are sometimes not the difference, but your sprinters, you will tend to see the big quads and the big butts, whereas some of the endurance runners really don't have much of a gluteal shape at all. So the calf muscle is actually itself, and that's one way you can sort of and I've learning from a strength and conditioning coach over here named David Joyce, and he's pretty knowledgeable. And I remember he was saying that, you know, learning from him that you can tell a lot by someone just by looking at the shape of their calves, you know. But are they a runner? Are they more suited to? And you even look at, say, basketballers, for instance, and they don't have big calves. They've often got sort of skinnier calves, but those skinny calves have got such powerful, like they're so elastic, you know, they're quite long, and they can really generate a lot of force. So for runners, for instance, they really, you know, whilst we've got this isometric contraction happening through here, the tendon is just so powerful it can snap them back, and they get a lot of that forward, and for basketballs, a lot of that vertical propulsion occurring from that tendon. And it's the same thing occurs during jumping as well. And in fact, most muscles, even the hamstrings, for instance, do focus. Most muscles act isometrically during running. It's actually the tendons that are lengthening and shortening. So yes, it's not just the calves, but most of the muscles in the legs will do that. It's a way for our body to essentially utilize and store and release that energy without having to generate it.
Amazing. So obviously there's slightly a tedious link then when we're looking at gait pattern, foot strike, and footwear. So, you know, obviously, well, different theories. You know, some people advocate the sort of maximalist running, you know, with the well-known Hokas and this and that. You know, have heel stack about 17 inches. You know, that kind of thing. And then you have the ultra minimalist, which are your Vivos, your Taddy Evos, your Vibrams, all these minimalist shoes that are kind of designed to be nothing at all. So, you know, I suppose the hypothesis there is, I remember reading about an experiment where they were measuring the ground reaction force in running. And essentially, the thicker the shoe, the more ground reaction force there was, so hence the more damage, and so forth and so forth. So the question, I suppose, is that how does that translate into running performance? Not necessarily just injury rates, but actually running performance. So if you're looking to run faster, would you then wear less shoe? Not only is it lighter, but actually it's from the mechanical perspective. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think that there's been a lot of debate on that in the last 10 years, and you know, there was the big barefoot and minimalist movement in back in the early part of the 2010s that and I've sort of obviously a lot of interest in that and read a lot about that. But I think from a performance point of view, one of the things that we've seen change with shoes is that they've got a lot lighter. And I think the weight of the shoe is obviously a big one, and that's something that they've found that anything over 200 grams, I think it's what is it? It's trying to remember the formula now, whether it's every 100 grams. I think it's every 100 grams over 200, you're losing 1% of your running economy, which is a fair whack, just for extra weight. So the sort of the ideal weight for shoes comes in around 200. Now you look at one of the reasons that racing flats, people race in them is they're so light. You know, they've and you look at even the latest Nike, you know, that we spoke earlier on about the next percent, but geez, you pick these things up and they are so light. They're just they're like feathers, and they're lighter than any, but they've got such a big midsole thickness. It's incredible how light these things are. So weight tends to matter quite a bit. And these days, what they're able to do with cushioning, you know, they can put quite a bit of cushioning in there, and it still be, you know, like the Nike, for instance, has a huge midsole. Yet it's able to, and they've been shown that it's improving running performance, and all the world records are being broken in them. So I think that if we look at, you know, those that might be more on the minimalist side of things, well, the results almost speak for themselves now, because you've got this shoe like the Nike Next Percent and the Alpha Fly that are so big and chunky. They've got the carbon plate in there, obviously, and records are being smashed. And so I think from the performance perspective, you know, cushioning may not be as, you know, as well. It can certainly work in your favor if you've got you know, a type of foam that suits to your body, that helps you with that energy storage and release. That's going to give you a benefit. I mean, anecdotally, myself, I've gone through, you know, different types of shoes over the years. I've gone minimalist. I've done, you know, experimented with barefoot running as well, so running without shoes, but then found myself going back to more, you know, with a bit more cushioning in them, and now, you know, I've got the next percent to give them a whirl, and hopefully break some of my PBs. But I think that some, you know, it's always, you know, when we're talking about shoes, and I think that if you can have the least on your feet but achieve the most, you know, I think that's what you want to achieve, you want to look at. So, you know, you don't need a lot of these functions that the shoes have got. And you know, we're seeing now these days a lot of shoe brands are really stripping their models back, and it's now coming down to, you know, they're really working for comfort and you know, what the ride is like in the shoe, you know, how your foot rolls through there, versus, you know, we're going to stop pronation, we're going to put these, you know, guards in through here. It's moving away from that, and I think that's as a result of that barefoot minimalist. That's right, of the barefoot minimalist movement, if you like. So
yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, obviously, you mentioned you gave it a good whirl as well. I know I've seen you in your minimalist stuff anyways before, and would you say that has been beneficial to your running technique in terms of, you know, you think about from the proprioceptive side of things, you know, joint position, kinesthetics, that kind of thing. Would you say that's helped you?
Yeah, I'd say that it probably gave me a number of benefits. It certainly helped with that, with the technique, and that's something that I did work on, was my running technique. The other thing as well that it helped with was strength. So I developed a lot of calf strength and foot strength. And in fact, I remember when I first started using, you know, went barefoot completely, you know, the things that I felt working were my calves. They really got a solid workout, to the point of, oh my gosh, they feel like they're going to explode. And so I think as a result of that, I developed a lot of good calf strength, but you have to obviously do that, you know. If you're going to make that transition, you have to do it smartly and not doing too much too soon, because it is obviously loading those you know, the feet and the calves up. So I think it gave me a really good baseline of strength in the foot and the calf, and then also help with that technique as well. Yeah, yep, definitely.
Cool. Now that's one thing. You know, I always tell my patients, you know, some of them are blatantly interested, you know, because I don't wear socks and shoes in clinic, so I'm always barefoot in clinic.
Ah, right. Yeah.
It's my little quirk, you know, I love doing that. So
yeah,
so a lot of patients like that, you know, they're asking questions, and, you know, I got my little running thingy bob on the wall and that, so they kind of, some of them connect the dots, and they say, oh, do you run barefoot as well? Yeah. I like barefoot,
yeah.
So yeah. I always tell patients, you know, to try it is just do a little hop and skip as their warm up without shoes on. Then put your shoes on for your main run, and then take them off again for your cool down. So you maybe get a couple of exposures of slightly different technique, and I always tell them to just pay attention and try and mimic that running technique when they're out on their actual run, which gives them something to think about. And also it's a bit less frightening for them, perhaps. You know, saying, right, go and run 5K barefoot, no shoes allowed. You know, never.
That's exactly right. It gets them sort of dialed in. They you know, get them. They know the feeling of it. So yeah, I think it can be a great great tool. Absolutely.
So yeah, you know, it's just a bit of a soft landing. I mean, something I quite enjoy doing as well is I do these running assessments with patients. I don't charge money for them. This is something I just, because I like doing it. And so we just go outside, and I just ask them to run whatever they do whatever they do. And then I just ask, you know, how did that feel? So they tell me kind of all the things that they feel are wrong with it. And then I say, all right, well, let's take off your socks and shoes now, put them on the side, and do the same thing again. And we go up and down a couple of times, and I'll say, okay, how was that different? And you'd be surprised. I mean, some of them are just speechless. You know, they're standing there. You know?
Yeah, no, yeah, you're absolutely right. It can really dial you in, and you see, you know, people, you know, previously that are hitting ground quite hard, then they're landing a lot softer, and yeah, you can see some quite quick changes with just making that switch.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's amazing, you know, because you know the difference is so vast, and patients are, you know, a lot of them going to go, oh wow, you know, I'll definitely start trying that. Then you obviously got to drag them back a little bit and start talking about the loading and all that,
Mm.
and gradually building in and the 10% rules and all this kind of stuff, which is good. But
Mm.
yeah, it's definitely I love doing that with patients. You know, the more people we get running, the better. You know, the better.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, people are, you know, we're struggling for global activity levels as it is, and that's, you know, one of the beauties of running is it's so accessible. You know, it's cheap. All you need is a pair of runners, and off you go. So I think that, yeah, running is a good opportunity, and as we've seen too, you know, in this COVID situation, you know, people have gyms are closed and pools are closed, and so a lot of people, I've never seen more people than ever than taking up running and putting the runners on. So it's a great sign to see, and hopefully, you know, things like with Park Run opens back up again soon, and all those things are really really encouraging for people to get out and get active.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah, no, it's been great in that sense. You know, obviously in the UK we had the lockdown was a little bit longer than you guys, but you know, obviously I saw a lot of families out. You know, families that, well, I've never seen before. I mean, not that I know every family in my neighborhood, but you know, it's one of those things that you see a lot of families all of a sudden dot around everywhere, and they're having fun in the parks. You know, they're running around with the kids, and couples or parents with kids running together. You know, and that's been great actually. You know, that is a great sort of, you know, side effect of this whole COVID thing. You know.
That's right. Look, and hopefully, you know, those people that have started on those habits are going to continue, and you know, keep moving and keep active. But once things start to return to normal.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Well, hey, listen, man, we have been cracking on here. We are doing so well. I'm thinking we're going to probably call it a day there.
It's probably a good idea. All the kids are getting up now, and they're starting to rustle. So I'm going to get the rush of getting ready for school now. So
absolutely, yeah. No, I got to let you go, and I'm going to go and behave myself. Might do a little stretch, a little yoga bit before I go to bed or whatnot. But yeah, hey, listen, man, thank you ever so much for being on the show. Really enjoyed that, having a chat, and learned a few new things. So thank you, Luke. Really,
my pleasure, mate. No, always good to chat to you, mate, and good to see your smiling face. And yeah, stay well over there, mate. And hopefully things start to, you know, everything opens up and get back to racing again. Hey.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon, man.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.